Hi, I'm marriage and family therapist Daniel Dashnaw, and this is the Better Relationships Through Research podcast. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Rick Miller, an internationally recognized psychotherapist, author, and speaker, known for his groundbreaking work with gay men, his focus on experiential therapy, and his emphasis on deep emotional attunement. Together, we'll explore Rick's innovative use of mindfulness, hypnosis, body awareness, and therapy. Now he helps his clients tap into their own inner resources to move towards healing. As someone who's followed Rick's work for years, I'm especially excited to unpack his holistic, heart-centered approach to therapy and the wisdom he brings from decades of clinical experience. Rick's a real thought leader. He's a speaker at the couples convention coming up. This will be a great conversation, and I hope it stays with you. Hi, I'm Daniel Dashnaw with the Better Relationships Through Research podcast. Today, it's my special guest to sit down with Rick Miller. Rick Miller is going to be the keynote speaker at the couples conference. He is a very well-known psychotherapist known for experiential therapy, emphasis on emotional attunement, and especially his work with gay men. Rick's an author and has a new book coming out, I understand. Could you tell me a little bit what it is?
Absolutely. Thank you for introducing me. It's a pleasure to be here. And you and I have been in contact in a variety of ways, and we get to kind of be face to face now.
Yes, we do.
And this is perfect timing for me because literally I'm doing the final proofreads of a new workbook that I wrote called for male couples. It's called Opening Up, a communication workbook for male couples. And as the title says, it implies that many gay male couples are needing a little bit of help to communicate with their partners. And that's absolutely what this workbook is all about.
Can you say a little bit more about, I know that you've been known for experiential kind of work,
Yeah.
and mindfulness work, heart-centered work. Could you explain a little bit of those dynamics within the interventions that you have in the book?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So, the approach that I take in all of the work that I do, including couples, is to be present and to really be attentive to yourself, what's happening inside. What are you feeling? What are the thoughts in your mind that you're experiencing in this moment? What is your body telling you that you ought to be paying attention to? And how do you communicate with your partner in a way that's helpful and productive rather than defensive? So within the workbook, I think there's 7 chapters. I speak about some of the psychosocial issues about being gay, growing up, dealing with money and finances, sexuality, but also each chapter has talking points for each member of the couple to discuss with each other, some introspective questions that people can go inside, think about, jot down their responses. And every chapter has a QR code to a guided meditation that I lead on that very topic. So it really ties everything together in a really simple way, which is my approach in doing couples work, which is be available, speak to your partner, learn the best ways of communicating possible, be attuned to your body, and be on track with each other.
Wow, so the QR code is the part that I was missing, Rick,
Yes, it's new for me too.
because I know you're very experiential, like, this is a workbook. Okay, so how experiential is it going to be? Well, there's QR code here for
Exactly. So the QR code will allow people to hear me.
Yeah,
So all they have to do is go onto the QR code, click the link, and then they have the meditation with me. That is, I'm not a tech guru. That was someone that helped me. So kind of cool that we can do that in this day and age.
that's very, very cool. Can we shift gears? I'd love to know about, your, keynote speech at the couples conference coming up, what you have to say about
Good timing for us to be meeting as well for this. So the topic of the conference this year, which of course is so relevant in so many different ways, reconnecting in a disconnected world. So that's the overall arching topic of the couples conference. My keynote talk is called Learning from Gay Male Couples: How to Have an Open Relationship and Maintain Intimacy. And the reason why I chose this topic is that, in my experience, a lot of couples therapists don't have a lot of experience in working with male couples,
Mhm.
may not have experience in working with sexuality, and many male couples want to have an open relationship or already have an open relationship when they come into couples therapy. And it's our task as therapists to be able to understand how that works, to support them in what's working well and what their challenges are, and to help them make the best of how their relationship is operating. I've gotten a lot of couples referrals from people who have said, I was working with a heterosexual therapist who challenged me around wanting to have an open relationship, and I felt ashamed by it, or I felt re traumatized, like being a kid all over again. What I can say about me as a gay man is that being part of the community means that I've had lots of conversations with male couples who have open relationships. So I've learned to think about it, talk about it, accept it. Not that I always want all my male couples to have open relationships. I really want them to think about, is this good for me? Is this good for us? How can we navigate it? And I go through a whole checklist, if you will, of things that are important. But what I've learned to do is not challenge them. That doesn't get anywhere. It gets them out of the door and not talking about it, and to work with them where they are.
That brings up a couple of questions for me about how that works. Like, did you look at sort of the best practices of successful couples that have opened and sort of reverse engineered it to best principles?
I'm not nearly as scientific as you are. So I looked at the best practices from my intuitive framework that came from working with a multitude of male couples. And if I this is me, not all clinicians are like me. Many clinicians need research and articles to help formulate their opinions. Whereas for me, I'll just go and wing it and hopefully do a decent job.
Well,
Um,
that's probably the difference between a good therapist and a thought leader.
well, I mean, again, some people wouldn't like the way that I operate, but I do have common sense. And so what I did is I thought about the people that I worked with over the years and created my own framework for them, and then began speaking about having an open relationship from that framework, which, by the way, is nothing over the top. It's about communicating and coming up with a list of agreements that work for them and revisiting if it's working or
Yeah.
not, and prioritizing the male couple that one is part of rather than outside. It's kind of that simple. And as soon as I began to talk about it with authority and comfort, it really helped people feel grounded in making decisions for themselves. And I also say one other thing, which is also common sense. When people are contemplating opening up a relationship, I'm not just talking about male couples, I'm talking about anyone. I use the analogy of a sliding door. You get to open the door as little or as much as you want. So that rather than flinging the door open with no boundaries and no safety, for some people, if you open up the sliding door just a little bit, what it may mean is they can flirt openly outside of the relationship and dabble with what it feels like and start there. So that sliding door analogy tends to be a source of comfort when I meet with people. They really like it.
That sounds useful to me. I've been fairly skeptical about what I've seen in the heterosexual community regarding, opening up relationships, and there's an emerging, amount of research about the emotional labor that's involved in opening
Yes.
up a relationship. Could you say something about that, in terms of the gay community?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also chuckling. I'm thinking about Tammy Nelson, who presented at the couples conference last year with me. And we were in a panel together, and she said, "Oh, gay men have been doing this forever." And it was funny and it was cute. But I think what she was also implying is, why reinvent the wheel? But here's the problem. I guess I'm now speaking about heterosexual couples. The problem is that this is a paradigm that is fairly new and really hasn't been considered before. So the emotional labor that it takes to do it safely and effectively is a lot of work. And what I'm always saying is, here we are, the gay male community. We've been doing this for a while. So take some of our lessons and apply it to yourselves. And of course, there are a lot of amazing therapists and sex therapists that are creating models that are working beautifully these days. But I wouldn't want anyone to think they need to do anything that they're uncomfortable with. That's for sure.
And that was something that also came up with me is the, what I call the origin theory of opening up. Is there usually a promoter and a reluctor? I mean, how does it basically work in terms of
I mean, I'm chuckling now. First of all, thank you. You're helping me from my keynote speech already by asking me these questions. Do you want to come and ask questions? Um, what I have found in many experiences is that frequently there's been one partner that has been having recreational sex on the side, very committed to their partners, but they've been doing it privately and quietly and reach a boiling point where they feel really bad about it.
Oh.
Or in some instances, come up with an STI and they have to tell their partners. So in these instances, what happens is that in longer term relationships, most often they find a way of working it out. Not easily, not without being in crisis. That's
Mhm.
frequently when they come into therapy. And that's when I take a stance of everything can be okay. And I normalize that it can be okay, only if I believe it is with this particular couple. There are other couples who are in crisis, and it is clear that this is a deal breaker. And I don't encourage those couples to work through it if it seems as though it's too much for one partner. In other instances, through a lot of discussion, many couples decide that they're ready to take the risk. They go out and they try it. For example, I worked with a male couple who had been monogamous for years. They decided they wanted to open the relationship. They began by going out to the bars together and saying, "Oh, he's cute, he's cute." And one of them would get the courage up or not get the courage up to hit on the other person. And they started by having three ways within the context of their relationship. Again, that's the door opening some,
Mhm.
but not all the way, because this particular couple didn't want to have encounters without their partners being present. What they realized was for a period of time is that it wasn't as magical as they thought it would be, that it was a lot of work, and that they were worrying about STIs. So they decided to go back to being monogamous for a while. So that's one example. A lot of couples open their relationships and are doing okay with it long before they get to couples therapy. So I always used to think, okay, I'm going to help them open up their relationships, and here's what I need to do. But in more than half of the cases, maybe even 75% of the cases, frequently they've already begun the process of opening up their relationship without guardrails, without knowing what's good and what's safe. That has led to tension. And those are the times that they come into therapy for couples work or individual work. And I frequently refer them out for couples work.
So that brings up another question about this sort of dynamic is, do you think, I don't like the way she said it. Do you think gay men have always done this? Do you think, was this open up of
Yeah.
aspect
Okay.
of
This is
eroticism?
a this is a great question. So, if you look at the history of LGBTQ people, it was illegal. Gay men in the 40s and 50s were arrested. They were turned in by the cops. They were beaten up. I mean, it's horrible. So that lack of acceptance in society meant that some people learned to repress themselves at all costs, whereas other people learned to deal with their sexuality on the side. And that was by going to public areas and hooking up with people and cruising and having sex and then stepping back into their normal lives. So I believe that what this may have set up is an ease with being sexual in a private, quiet kind of way. And as gay men and gay couples and LGBTQ people are accepted, the norm of gay men being sexual has carried forth. And I would say one more thing, not just about gay men, that male sexuality is very similar for all men. It's just that the gay male community has a greater sense of freedom within the community. And I wouldn't be surprised if many heterosexual men would love the freedom that gay men have, but their wives wouldn't. So,
Well, I think what you said is proven in the research, which I thought was kind of stunning, which is
yeah.
with heterosexual couples with infidelity, much of the time, the husband who's stepping out profoundly loves his wife.
Yes, totally. And, I really love the work of Esther Perel and Michel Weiner-Davis, who talk about infidelity. But I think what Esther was able to do I'm forgetting the name of her book that dealt with infidelity. I think it's called Infidelity.
Yeah.
She spoke about why people are unfaithful from a whole different vantage point of troubled relationships, sociopath, narcissist.
Yeah.
What she spoke about is that people frequently are unfaithful for a number of reasons that has nothing to do about their relationship. It could be something being enacted from their family of origin. It could be career stress. It could be a way of relieving stress. It could be that they're lacking excitement in their life in
Yeah.
general and they want more. It could be a cultural issue based on how they were raised. And it's like someone is giving us permission to think about this differently without pathologizing.
That I thought was Esther's greatest contribution.
Totally. I agree, and she's pretty amazing anyways, let's face it.
Where I struggle with some of her ideas is around the notion of disclosure and
Yeah.
mystery. For example, State of Affairs is her book.
Oh, that's
Um,
it, that
she tells a story of a client named Lena who goes to a college reunion, gets drunk, sleeps with her ex-boyfriend,
yeah,
and
right.
basically says, "Oh, gee, what do I do?" And Esther's like, "Well, don't tell him." When you're talking about going outside, when you're talking about a notion of integrity in a relationship,
Yes.
I'm struck by how careful you are about managing this sort of porousness.
Yes.
But to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you screwed up, don't tell him,"
Right.
it seems like battlefield triage. My other question was, should this man perhaps understand that his wife to be is may not be worthy? Well, the context of what she said was, "The reason I'm so scared is because my fiancé told me that his ex cheated on him with his best friend, and if I ever cheated on him, he would have a really hard time. What do I do?"
That's interesting. Well, I mean, I think maybe you and I might be thinking the same thing without your saying it, which is that we would rather have them take the risk of speaking honestly and openly and dealing with what's on the table. And in my experience as a couples therapist, it's never easy or fun, but couples can get through these
Yes.
kind of crises. It takes a lot of work, and frequently that's where we come in with a lot of coaching, normalizing, and optimism. By the way, is this podcast generally listened to by couples therapists or the general population?
I think it's probably both.
Oh,
I
okay.
know on my
Yeah,
blog, I have a recognizable readership of therapists that
great.
read me
Yeah.
and leave me comments. That's the thing that I'm wondering about is the nature of intimacy today and the nature of connection. I was going back to the notions and the ideas you're going to talk about the couples conference about connection within a world of disconnection.
Yes.
But we're
Yeah.
also talking about different kinds of connection within a world,
And different models of
different models of
connection that at our age may feel like an automatic disconnection because we grew up in a world where monogamy was stressed and we didn't know that we necessarily had choices except to be monogamous. I guess in the gay male community, that's not exactly the case. But most of us were raised in families where we were taught you got to be monogamous, which doesn't mean it was happening. It's
Oh,
just
of
what we
course.
learned. Right, right. So when I think about younger people who were growing up in a totally different world, they are being told and they're being offered choices of non-consensual non-monogamy, polyamorous relationships, and many people are making it work. But again, like you said earlier, not without extra work.
Yeah, it's the emotional labor piece, which is coming to the fore.
Constant communication, constant labor. When I think about my evolution as a couples therapist, or even just as an individual therapist, I worked with many gay men who have had open relationships. And in the context of those open relationships are various forms of open. Some people only have threesomes with each other. Some people have recreational sex, but they never get together with that person again because they've agreed that they won't. Some people are allowed to have romantic connections with other people. Some couples, one of them has a boyfriend, which is polyamorous, or perhaps both have a boyfriend, which also is polyamorous. We never used this word before because we didn't really know it existed for gay men. So this concept is growing. So for gay men that are in an open relationship, that doesn't imply that they're polyamorous, but sometimes that is the case. And one example is a gay male who's happily married came to see me because he had fallen in love with another man, but he didn't want to leave his husband because they have a really good relationship. So he went to his husband saying, I want to have an open relationship, and then eventually told his husband that he wasn't being 100% honest, that really what he wanted to do was see this one person simultaneously. His
Wow.
husband said, "I can't do it. I'm sorry. If you need this, we need to separate." And over time, when it came to really thinking about separating, the husband said, "Explain what you want again, please, because I'm not sure that I really want to leave you." And they're in the process of figuring this out, and I'll keep you posted next year if you interview me again. But we live in a different world now.
That led me to another question, which is, do you sometimes do find yourself doing divorce therapy because these agreements break down?
First, I try and do communication therapy and more intimacy. I don't know if I've been fortunate or the people that see me self-select and come because they have a sense of hope and they've heard through mutual friends of theirs that I'll be helpful. In very rare instances has that happened. I worked with one couple that had an open relationship for about 2 or 3 years. One of them was using drugs, and I was trying to work with that unsuccessfully, and I was also trying to get them to have a monogamous relationship, because it was just too chaotic, and that didn't work. They stopped couples work, and I heard a couple of years later that they got a divorce. That didn't happen in the course of their treatment.
So, what I'm hearing you say, the emphasis in your work is always upon connection and accommodation and listening and bestowing attention to each partner and hearing, what their preferences are. But because of the nature of this work, you can have many different sort of scenarios of how openness comes into the therapy couch. It could be it's already pre-existing, could be we've never done this before, we'd like to start. There's many iterations of it. How much of it is predicated on this notion of, as you said, one partner needing to come clean or wanting to be is that, like, perhaps the most common dynamic?
I'm finding that it's a common dynamic with couples that have been together 20, 30 years, that they've been faithful, and at a certain point, one may have begun venturing out for hookups and either compartmentalized it and didn't think about it or felt guilty about it and eventually began to share that with his partner. And so these are the couples that have been committed. Maybe their relationship has become a little stale and a little rote, but their commitment has never waned. And so these are the couples that I love working with because what I get to do frequently, they've waited a little too long to come to couples therapy. But what I get to do in these instances is help them strengthen what they do have and help them decide whether they want to continue to be with each other or not. And after all these years, and again, this is a self-selecting group of healthy-ish couples.
Mhm.
that wanna come in and talk about it. They don't wanna come in to break up, they wanna come in to restore their relationship. And these are the couples that thrive in couples therapy because they forgot how much good exists between them. And so what I get to do is help them restore the intimacy of their relationship, including sexuality or not, mostly, hopefully including sexuality, definitely including communication. And in some instances, they've reached a point where they really are okay with an open relationship, but they just weren't tending to their needs mutually as much as they should have. I am in no way saying that every couple should do this. I'm just saying that these are some of the people that have come my way, and I've had great success in working with these couples.
Well, as Michel Weiner-Davis told me, if you don't sit with that couple, who will?
Yes, and so let me tell you how I met Michele Weiner-Davis. I met her at one of the couples conferences or the Milton Erickson conferences, and she was giving a workshop on infidelity. I forgot what the name of the workshop was, and she was showing videotapes. This is very common in the therapy world of the husband cheating on the wife. I don't know why this is the case, but most couples therapists that present cases and always end up being the husbands that cheat. The wives are angry, demanding. I mean, it's stereotypical. And the audience was up in arms about this husband. And I'm like raising my hand saying, why is it that husbands are always characterized as avoidant and dismissive and pathologized by therapists as a result? Have a little compassion for this man. So it totally changed the frame of that conversation, and it enabled Michelle and I to become friends. So it's funny, her approach, she's like, the partners get to know whatever they want. They get to ask any question. They get to go through their partner's phone. And that's different from how I do things because I certainly promote open communication and speaking as much as they want. But I also promote privacy in that if you enable the couple to check in, there's a sneaky dynamic there, which people do anyways, that isn't it's not fair. Then people get engaged in catching their partner. And I believe it would be so much healthier to say to your partner, I'm feeling uneasy and I'm worried that you're cheating on me. I'm worried that you're not being honest with me. I would much rather have couples talk rather than sneaking and catching them because even in open relationships, partners do that a lot.
Yeah, and but the way I see it is we have to decenter the smartphone in
Yeah.
American intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well
It's
put.
a huge problem, in my
Mhm.
opinion. You made a comment a little bit back that struck me. You were describing, I thought, if I understood it correctly, a subset of gay men that are not sexual.
Yeah, yes.
So, it's been my understanding from Michelle again, that about 20% of hetero couples are not sexual. Does that same percentage carry over in the gay
Yeah,
couple?
I would say it's probably the same, and probably it's based betrayals that have taken place over time,
Uh-huh.
as well as, the nature of long-term relationships, and, some people phase away from being sexual. However, it doesn't have to be that way. So I've worked with heterosexual couples, gay couples, helping them to work on intimacy, and it's really interesting how couples view intimacy with a sense of self consciousness and failure, and they don't talk about it with each other or anyone else. So, again, my stance is to reassure them this is totally normal. I talk about it a lot with other couples. Here are some things that you can do. And some of the things that I do is reassure couples that predictability is just what happens over the course of years. And if you're comparing the sexiness of a young person out there or a hookup with a new person who you don't know to the sexuality that exists between you and your spouse, then you're being completely unrealistic. And I really encourage them to focus on what feels good, sensate focus, to establish realistic expectations for themselves that will promote closeness and warmth that may lead to intimacy and sexuality rather than expecting Herculean things to happen.
Wow. Wow. Well said. Can we go back to your book for a moment?
Yep.
The book that's about
Yes.
to come
I'm
out.
so excited about my book.
Yeah, and help me understand a little bit more about what you just said plays into that. For
Yes.
example, if 20% of gay couples like fall away from being erotic with one another, do you have exercises for that in that
Yeah.
book? For
Yeah.
example?
There is a chapter on sexuality. So this is a relatively short workbook. And what I did was touched upon the themes that are coming up most in the couples that I work with. And of course, because I'm gay, I'm choosing a gay focus and sensibility to present the information for the people that are going to look at this book. So I'm talking about norms in the gay community and what that means to you as a couple. I'm talking about growing up gay and the level of shame that you've experienced as gay men and what that means that you're bringing in as a couple. I'm talking about how religion and culture has impacted your upbringing. I talk about sexuality and open relationships and how that can work or can get in the way because not all couples are open. What else am I talking about? Trauma, of course. So what I'm doing is I'm talking about these things from a gay male point of view. And a lot of my male clients have complained over the years that there's no books out there to help them or to guide them, and that what they've been doing is taking a heterosexual paradigm and using that and either adapting or feeling resentful, feeling invisible that there's nothing there. So the book for me was a fairly easy write because of the experience that I've had and the exercises and all that. And again, it's a very simple, basic workbook that has information and exercises. And I'm hoping that the accessibility will make a difference.
Who's the publisher?
It's called Pamet Publications. It's a local publisher.
Excellent. Are you still on the Cape, by the way?
I'm sitting in my office in Truro, Cape Cod as we speak.
Well, I now live in Plymouth.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
let's get together.
Yes,
God.
I'd love
How
to do
nice.
that. I work at the Advocates Clinic part-time
Oh,
in
wow.
Plymouth, working with local families, and I still have my private practice on the side.
Oh,
Um,
how nice. Wow. That's great to know.
yeah, let's get together. That'd be
Absolutely.
wonderful. I have one more question that I wanna ask for you,
Yeah.
about your keynote speak. What's the number one thing that you feel that straight couples can learn from gay male couples?
Well, the number one thing is that it can be done. But the number one thing for therapists that are going to be hearing me is that either as a therapist, you get to choose if you feel comfortable working under these circumstances. And if you do, adapt, develop a stance that is accepting and welcoming.
Mhm.
And if you don't, that is okay too. Because what I do is I see a lot of couples who have a couples therapist. I consult with a couple around sexuality and opening up. I then keep in close communication with the therapist, and it works beautifully. So I really want clinicians to be honest with themselves about whether they feel as though they can do this and be accepting or not, and then figure out a way to work differently.
So, just wanna that kinda just blew my mind a little bit. I wanna go back to it. So what you're saying is that the nature of this work of opening up a relationship is I don't wanna use the word controversial, but there's something about it in terms of
It's unknown.
comfort.
Yeah,
It's
it's
yeah,
something that most of us haven't known about.
I mean, certainly wasn't part of my program at
Right.
Antioch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say basically is that, and I may have gotten this wrong, is that other couples therapists are literally outsourcing their opening work to you,
Or ought to be.
or ought to be.
And
Okay.
that's my hope of the message that I can put out there, that instead of giving up the beautiful work that they may be doing with the couple, yes, outsource this particular piece, and I'll work with you, or someone else can work with
Yeah.
you. For example, I work with gay men and I refer them out to work on their sexuality, or I even refer people to intimacy coaches while they work with me, even in the context of therapy or couples therapy. It's a whole new world out there, very different from what we were taught to do. And that part to me is really, really exciting.
Because one of the things that always concerned me, because this is so new, this notion of openness, was I was frankly concerned that therapists might be chasing the next new thing or be sliding into a role of advocacy.
Well, and how can you be inauthentic in dealing with sexuality and intimacy, which is such a profound, powerful topic? It's like you got to be in it and you got to be comfortable. And if you're faking it till you make it, I don't know. I mean, this is a really important topic. I think what's also happening, which is incredible, is that our field of mental health is merging more with the field of sexual health. And
Yes,
now more than ever, therapists are getting trained in sexuality, whereas 20 years ago, they were two distinct
separate
worlds.
fields.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So now we have a bunch of hip people, some of them are younger, some of them are older, that are getting trained in sexuality and delivering goods and services that are more modern and are getting at the kinds of things that we're talking about today. David Lay, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a therapist that focuses on sexuality, and he wrote a blog about a month ago. It was in Psychology Today, and what he was talking about was that therapists who are trained in sexuality are more successful in dealing with open relationships and polyamory than therapists that haven't been trained in sexuality. And I
That's what I was looking for.
okay,
That
good.
that that wow.
Yes, and there's a lot of people out there, and the people that I consult with, I teach for, or I'm friends with. David Lay is one person who I respect. There's ASECT, American, I don't know what the other A is, Society for Sex Therapy. I'm forgetting the name. There's two organizations in the United States. Rachel Needle runs a sex therapy training program online called Modern Sex Therapy Institute. I've done a lot of work with them.
Uh-huh.
So what's been happening in the last 10 or 15 years is that people are changing their thought process and the way that they do clinical work to adapt into talking about sexuality more. And it's really, really promising.
Excellent. That's really, really good to hear because that I'm from that era of it being very, very, very separate.
Well, yeah, you and I were, we were trained and we're probably the same age and grew up in so what I did as a gay man, I just kept my mouth shut, including in my clinical work. Because if I spoke out loud about the conversations I was having with people, oh my God, the general therapy community would die, totally die.
What's the best way for a reluctant or sort of polycurious therapist who wants to have more sexual education, more awareness? Where should they go first for something like that, Rick?
Yeah, I think any of these and training institutes would be the way to go. Modern sex therapy,
Mhm.
ASEX, and I'm STAR, Society for Sex Therapy and Research. SSTAR. The other one was ASECT, AASECT, and then Modern Sex Therapy Institute. There are more training programs out there. The other thing people can do within the context of regular conferences is find workshops, just, and start there and see how it feels. Because again, sexuality is beginning to creep into the mainstream of psychotherapy. And again, I think of people like Esther Perel. She's a groundbreaker. Not only is she amazing, but she began talking about sexuality 15, 20 years ago, and she was comfortable stepping out of the box in our very limited world of psychotherapy. And people are gravitating to her, to topics like this. And now we're getting modern, cool therapists who are addressing sexuality, which is incredible.
Something that didn't used to happen.
Nope, it was, like, shunned, and we would say we needed to talk about sexuality with our clients, and frequently we didn't, and even as a gay man, I was thinking, "Oh, I talk about sex all the time," but as I really began to think about it and began to do more research and more writing, I realized I was asking safe questions and that I needed to be far more explicit and use the words that they used while talking about sexuality rather than the formal clinical language which kept a distance between things.
Maybe there's another book there for you to translate that for therapists working with stray couples.
Then I have to be comfortable using dirty words.
I guess you would. Rick, it's been a pleasure to see
Oh,
you.
absolutely.
Let's get
Thank you.
together and have
I
dinner.
would love that.
Love to do that.
Definitely. And we can meet halfway, which is
Yeah,
Hyannis.
absolutely,
That would be
absolutely.
great. Well, thank you so much. I love the questions, and you and I make a great team based on the scientific research that you've done and my focus. So this has been wonderful.
Yeah, it was really great, and I really loved the work we did during COVID. I got to learn about how your clients were dealing with that. That was just a wonderful
It was
situation.
great, totally great, and we learned a lot during COVID too.
So, Rick, where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me on social media. Rick Miller, LICSW, licensed independent clinical social worker. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I also have a website called rickmiller.biz, B-I-Z. The unfortunate thing about my name is that there's 9,000 Rick Millers out there.
Yeah.
So rickmiller.biz. And I also run a nonprofit called Gay Sons and Mothers. It's also on social media. And I just completed a film, a short documentary about the emotional bond between mothers and their gay sons and what works. It's pretty profound.
Wonderful. Anything else that you want to leave with my audience?
I can't think of anything, but
All
thank you.
right.
Thank you for this time. It's been amazing.
When's the book coming out and when's the film coming out?
The book is coming out literally within a week or two, so my guess is by the time the podcast is edited, it will be on Amazon. Again, it's called Opening Up, a communication workbook for male couples. The film is being released into film festivals, so if you follow me on Gay Sons and Mothers anywhere, you'll see places to access the film before it's available to the general public.
Okay, Rick Miller, my guest today, thought leader extraordinaire. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you so much. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Great to see you again.
Take
Take
care.
care.